Hello and welcome to the Dissect and Connect podcast. I'm your host, Mike Wade. This is the podcast where we explore population health issues impacting your community. Dissect and Connect is a service of New River Valley Community Services and the Montgomery County Prevention Partners. Megan Sharkey has been with Vocal, a peer-led mental health advocacy and resources nonprofit, for 3 years. Before Megan's arrival at Vocal, they completed their Masters of Social Work with a concentration in nonprofit management, administration, programs, and policy at Virginia Commonwealth University. Megan began their intentional journey into recovery and wellness in 2016, and they continue to work daily to manage symptoms of anxiety, depression, and past traumas. The well-known quote, "Nothing about us without us," acts as the main motivator for Megan's work, as they aim to leverage their personal and professional lived experience to ensure more equitable services for all Virginians seeking behavioral health care services. Megan recently got married and bought their first home all in one chaotic, lovely month. They live with their wife, 2 dogs, and a cat in Petersburg, Virginia. So Megan, welcome to the Dissect and Connect podcast.
Thanks, Mike. Great to be here.
For those who are listening and aren't familiar with Vocal, can you share a little bit more about the organization and its mission?
Yes, happy to. So Vocal is a nonprofit organization that was first incorporated in Virginia in 2000. So we're coming up on I think we're about to hit our 20, maybe it was 2001. I know there's an anniversary date coming up somewhere.
Right.
And we work to serve peers in recovery across the state of Virginia. And we do this through programming that focuses on advocacy at the state level. So advocating for recovery-oriented systems of care across the behavioral health system. In addition to advocacy, we do recovery education trainings. And these generally serve for certified peer recovery specialists to keep with their recertification hours to get their continuing education credits. And for others who are, not specifically looking for the continuing education credits, they are just helpful professional development workshops, as from our perspective. And then the last main thing that we work to do is to offer just formal and informal spaces for peers from the same communities or different communities across the state to connect. And, the big importance of that connection is that it's a part of recovery, kind of like the opposite. There's this saying that I've heard, the opposite of addiction is connection.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just something that we try to do. And so the technical answer, the vision, our organization's vision is to create a peer-driven mental health care system in Virginia. And our mission is to empower individuals to find and, develop their own recovery through programs and activities that aim to encourage personal transformation, community transformation, and systems transformation.
Fantastic.
So that's Vocal in a big nutshell.
Thank you for that. I introduced you a little bit to the audience at the start of the show, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about yourself, including your specific role in the organization and what that involves.
Yeah. I will start with me and then go into me within Vocal. So I'm a Jersey native. I grew up at the Jersey Shore. And moved down south, I guess about 5 years ago now. I'm quite happy with it. I don't think I'll be moving back north. I do go visit, because most of my family's up there still. I got my Master's of Social Work from Virginia Commonwealth University. So starting my grad program was a part of the reason why I moved down to Richmond. I got married within the past year.
Congratulations.
And my wife and I also bought a house. Thank you. And that was all during 2020. So that was kind of wild to be having these big, exciting life events set within like the world's chaos and tragedy. And yeah, we have 2 dogs and a cat. About me in my job, I am the REACH program director And REACH is an acronym for Recovery, Education, and Creative Healing. And that basically means that I am coordinating the recovery education trainings that we do. And as well as, coordinating the trainings, it also allows me to connect a lot with peers, whether that's, in group spaces or on the individual level. I try to be available to answer questions if somebody's trying to figure out what continuing education credits do I need to stay, credentialed? Where do I get this specific training? That's another part of some of my work that isn't really on the job description.
Would you be willing to share a little bit more about your personal recovery journey?
Yeah, I can do that. So my recovery journey is very much tied with my coming out story as being a gay person, being a gender non-conforming person. And along with, a family culture that wasn't very open to non-heterosexual relationships. It was also a family culture that didn't want to talk about mental health challenges, which I know is commonplace in a lot of families because there is that stigma that folks are still pushing against. And so for me, my intentional recovery journey began when I left my home community and was kind of out in the world by myself. So early 20s or so is when I recognized the extra challenges. I recognized that my mind worked differently than other people, that, my anxiety was bigger. It wasn't just because, school was tough or whatever. And so from there, I've done, it's been up and down like a lot of people. But I feel like I'm in a good place now. Prior to COVID, I felt like I had reached a really nice place in my recovery. I had been using my WRAP, my Wellness Recovery Action Plan. And that really helped me to figure out, what are the things that I know that can help me kind of regulate myself? What are my wellness tools? And then what are these things that I know that are going to, be a hot spot for me? I know that when I go home and there's a lot of conservative culture around me, that's a hot spot for me.
Sure.
Because of, my past history with it. But my WRAP plan helps me know, how do I plan for that? So anyway, 2020, I was doing good. I was like, okay, I'm at this new reprieve with my recovery. And then COVID came and a lot of my wellness tools weren't working to the same effect. So I've learned more, I think, about my recovery in the past year, about my depression, and about kind of having to get back to the gym. I mentioned to you that I went to the gym this morning. It's kind of like I got to get back to the bench press of my my recovery.
Sure.
Because it's been tough.
And I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
Is it your own journey of recovery that has made this work appealing to you, or are there other factors?
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, vital for me and for vocal staff. We are peer run, which I mentioned, but everybody on staff has their own lived experience of mental health or co-occurring substance use challenges. But yeah, if I did not have my own experience of recovery, there would be no way I could do this work, and especially sustainably, because I think I do need to be able to reflect back on my own journey and my own struggles in order to kind of keep going. Because sometimes in my recovery, I know that I can't really see the light at the end of the tunnel in that specific moment, but I do know that I need to put one foot in front of the other and keep going, because there is a light. Even though I can't reach the light right now, I know there's one there because I've been there before.
Right.
And I think that's also kind of what I need as a behavioral health professional in order to keep going in the light of the many challenges, systems level, community level, in order to know that one day the collective is going to, march into the decision-making room and everyone will just fall away.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, which you've mentioned a couple of times, the increases in overdose, statistics about people who are struggling with mental health issues, depression, anxiety, all those numbers are up. So I was wondering if you could share your perspective on how COVID-19 has impacted recovery in general.
Yeah, there's definitely the obvious stats, like you said. I think more people are experiencing mental health or, psychological distress challenges. I also think more people are dabbling in substances, maybe because we have way more time on our hands.
Right.
And so I think that's a reality. It's not anything that, we haven't been trying to manage before. So I do think we have the infrastructure and we have the resources and we know what needs to happen in order to provide safe and, helpful services to folks. And so what I hope is going to be happening is that more people are going to be talking about their personal challenges. And through that talking, that normalization, that the stigma eventually will be, reduced. And so, I hope that the conversations will happen. People will then know or seek from peers where to get resources, where to get services. And then I hope folks will go and access those services. And then it's important to make sure that those services are person-centered and following, from my perspective, the peer core of competencies to make sure that they're affirming so that individual will come back past just the intake appointment.
Well, most organizations, businesses have had to change how they do things in light of the pandemic. How have things changed for Vocal? What are you doing differently?
We are fully virtual. And I think we were an organization that was put in an okay position because we don't do so much direct services. Our work is more on the programmatic level. So a lot of programmatic strategy meetings can go online via Zoom. Our recovery education trainings have, for the most part, we've been able to transition every curriculum to an online format. There are one or two facilitator trainings that are a bit more extensive and interactive that we haven't been able to get to an online platform. So those trainings are on hold. But for the most part, we have been able to go online and still, I think, connect with our members and offer spaces. One of the silver linings from my perspective is the elimination of geographical challenges.
Right.
With that said, of course, you need to recognize that not everybody has access to internet or reliable internet. So that's kind of like some of our next thinking, some of our advocacy work as we adjust to, I think, a more digitalized world post-COVID, because a lot of folks have learned that we can do our jobs from home.
Right.
We as an organization are even, thinking about, are we going to lease the same office space, or will we maybe go to like a co-working where you just rent like an office or whatever in a building, so reduce costs that ways. So we have been able to still do our work online, and there is still something missing about not being able to be in person, which I know is important to me and a lot of our members.
Sure.
Especially thinking about our annual recovery conference. That was when every year in May, like 200 to 300 Vocal members would gather for like a 2 or 3 day workshops, karaoke, like meals together. And so I know a lot of us are really looking forward to when we can gather again safely. And I think we're also going to take what we've learned about digital trainings and the positive aspects of that and bring them into the future. Because I think there are a lot of good things that we've been able to accomplish this year.
We've thrown about the R word, recovery, quite a bit in our conversation so far. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about what it means to you specifically.
Yes. Recovery means everything. Recovery means my survival. Mm-hmm. Recovery means my happiness, my wellness. An important part for me, I think, is like modeling wellness and modeling recovery. So whether that means like actually not looking or seeming well, and I name that and I explain it to whoever I'm with, rather than, kind of putting on a fake face and being like, oh yeah, I'm good, nothing's wrong with me. So being in a good place in my recovery means that I have that confidence to name it and own it and not be fearful of the stigma or anybody else's judgment. And that goes along with, my identity as a trans person. When my mental and my emotional being feels well and confident, then I can, step into any room with much less hesitation. And then thinking about one of my other kind of personal missions is to show up as my full authentic self in my hometown. It's hard sometimes, for sure, because there's a lot of, trauma there that isn't fully resolved. But at the same time, it's, I think, also a part of my healing to go there and know that I can be my full self and manage the responses. And I'm an adult. Anything folks throw at me, I can, figure it out. Stuff has come my way before and I've survived. Right. But I have a lot of younger cousins who I think are in similar struggles. They're at, transitional age, early 20s, where you're kind of just learning that the world is not what your parents sold you as a young kid. It's way more complicated. Paying your bills all by yourself is hard. Yeah. Managing your emotional, regulations, your anger, all that stuff, it's hard. And so I do hope that I can be, a resource for them. They can see, oh yeah, Megan had these struggles that seem like what I've been dealing with, and, they survived and they're happy living in Virginia, working a job, and, I can strive for that too.
Do you feel that individuals in recovery are better understood and accepted maybe than they were 10, 20 years ago?
I think so. I do. It's always that saying, be sure to not only be looking forward at the hill ahead, but also remember to turn around to see where you've come. I do have to remind myself, because sometimes I can get pretty bogged down with the current frustrations about why don't more people know about recovery and know that we're not criminals and nobody's just using drugs all day because they want to. But I think I think there's some signals in Virginia that we've made some big strides. The first one that comes to mind is Medicaid reimbursement for peer recovery services. And that was passed in 2017 and approved. So I think that goes a long way to signal money talks, of course. So it signals the prestige, I think. Their peers are a certified entity. They, are registered with the Board of Counseling, and now we're getting reimbursement. 10 years from now, I'm hoping the reimbursement is a bit more, because that's our current advocacy work. Right. But it's important to know that happened. So that's, I think, a jump in understanding and hopefully the respect that folks maybe will see from recognizing that Medicaid reimbursement will continue to grow out or expand out. And I think the other thing for me, trying to think 10 years ago, I just, my own young age, I was only very early in my own recovery and I wasn't living in Virginia, so I can't say too much about it. But I will say that I think, especially, this past year, I think the conversations about recovery are more plentiful and I think are also like more full of helpful content. I think there's more information out there and it's getting spread.
And obviously social media plays a role in that.
Yes.
So what's your take on that?
Ooh, social media is a tough one. There are lots of positives, connection, community, and I think those are all great. And I think at the same time, people should consider taking breaks. I know I need to take breaks because self-preservation, I'm protecting my wellness. And with all of, the current events, the violence, what feels like chaos just all the time, it can be really exhausting. And especially for people who, I'm thinking like for folks who experience empathness, like there's a lot of emotion on screens and we absorb a lot of that stuff subconsciously, consciously. Yeah. It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Social media is for sure a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have a love-hate relationship with it. For sure.
Yeah.
So what are some of the biggest challenges for a person in recovery as we talk in 2021?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges is finding affirming services. So thinking about me as a queer person. When I was looking for my therapist, I was definitely interested in finding a therapist that had experience in working with other queer LGBTQ plus people. And it took me a couple times to find one, but then I found one. I think approaching that whenever I'm talking to a newer person who's looking for a therapy recommendation or some sort of service recommendation for a direct provider, I always make the disclaimer of like, it's important to find the fit. And so if it means that you go to 3 or 4 like intake appointments before you find someone, like be prepared for that. And go to that second appointment. Don't think just because that first person you don't vibe with, it's like, oh, well, I just don't need this service.
Right.
I think that's where the community might be losing a lot of folks who want services, is that they attempt, and then for some reason, something about the exchange doesn't go well, and it kind of turns them off. Thinking about another perspective for, our Black community members, if they walk into a resource center and no one looks like them, or there's no like evidence of anyone who looks like them around in the culture and the physical space, they're probably not gonna, be excited to come back. And there are some big challenges about representation in terms of like the number of clinicians. Majority are white, because if you pull out this big bubble to the macro lens, who have been the people who have had the most opportunity to get to the higher education levels, to get to that clinical degree. So we need to come at addressing this, I think, in so many different ways. And it's not just, the recovery community, it's the whole world. And I'm hoping we're shifting as a collective. So I think, my first one about challenges for folks in recovery is finding services that feel good, that are affirming, that you see yourself reflected in. I think it's also, I keep seeing this meme on Facebook, one of the positives of social media, the like poetry quote you can kind of find, that saying that culturally we need to stop congratulating burnout. Like talking about how, I worked all day and I got that promotion and that's great. And like, I'm doing all these big achievements because I'm running myself dry.
Yeah.
But like, wouldn't it be great if we, celebrated Mike took an hour off from work today and like went for a nice nature walk.
Mm-hmm.
And, Megan actually emailed their boss and was like, hey, I can't complete that assignment because I need to go do like a meditation session or something.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of being okay with not fitting into the norm. That's someone in recovery kind of has to reach that point where it's like this mold that's set up of like what an adult is supposed to do in America doesn't really fit me, and that's fine. I'm just going to make my own mold somewhere.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And I think that'll be great. I mean, the diversity creates more innovation. And so if more people are taking themselves out of that box that, they think they need to be in, I think it's all the better.
Let's flip the coin, so to speak. Are there advantages to being a person in recovery?
There are advantages. I think definitely there are advantages. I think a lot of my confidence has come from my struggles.
Mm-hmm.
There's this term that we've talked about, firewalkers. And Vocal actually published or collaborated with other peers to publish a book in 2009 called Firewalkers, Radically Rethinking Mental Illness. But basically the meaning behind firewalkers is that an individual who has walked through fire and become stronger because of it. So if I never experienced my recovery struggles, I wouldn't be able to connect with the people that I am. I wouldn't have the same empathy that I have, nor would I be able to strategically use my story to then reach out to people. I also think like fellow recovery community members are one of the positives, because I think the community is just so great. Some of like my closest friends are folks that I've met in this and I think one of the reasons why our relationships have grown is because, my experience of my recovery and my wellness is so integral to my everyday life and who I am. And that authentic understanding and that empathy that I know that a fellow peer can offer me is, you just can't find it anywhere else. And the last advantage for me is I like being a weirdo. I like being an outsider. So the fact that, my adult journey has just led me even more into those arenas, I feel good about it.
You mentioned the book, Firewalkers.
Firewalkers, yes.
We'll include a link to that in the show notes. But I wonder if there are any other resources that you might suggest or recommend to our listeners.
Yes. Lots of good things online for folks that are connected to the internet. And so folks can definitely come to our website, vocalvirginia.org. We coordinate probably a recovery educational training once a month, every other month or so.
Mm-hmm.
Coming up in the near future in May will be our annual recovery conference, which I mentioned earlier. This year we are still doing a digital conference. We're hoping, fingers crossed, 2022 we'll be back in person. But that information is on the website. I think registration opens this week or so. And for other resources, I've had a lot of success doing some Google searches for specific support groups. So I've looked for some recovery groups that are specific to folks in the LGBTQ plus community, and I found some of those online. The Wildflower Alliance is a good resource. That's a peer-run organization that's actually based up in Massachusetts.
Okay.
But they have a large calendar of various support groups for various different pieces of recovery that might match some of folks' interests. So I definitely encourage folks to check out their website. And then, classic resources in Virginia would be Mental Health America of Virginia. They do pretty regular events. Our stuff, Vocal, NAMI Virginia, they have good. And also for caretakers or family members, NAMI has some good resources there. They do a family-to-family class that goes into a bit more of like understanding recovery.
Mm-hmm.
So someone who is not a peer would be able to, more connect and support their loved one in a better way. And other resources, I would say folks can feel free to reach out to me at Vocal. My email address, you'll probably put it in the notes, but
Sure.
It's Megan@vocalvirginia.org. Like I said, I'm available to answer any questions about pathway towards certification. Where do I start? I'm new to the recovery journey. What do I do? There's local peer-run centers, and a lot of those have gone online, but they're another good one on our own at the Roanoke Valley and 401 Peer Center. You obviously know them.
Right.
So those are all the resources that come to mind for sure.
Well, we'll definitely put all those links in our show notes for today's episode. And we're about out of time, but before we go, I'd love for you to share some parting words of wisdom with our audience.
Yes. The first one I'll say, which a lot of folks know, is nothing about us without us. I picked that up in grad school and have really run with it. And just really think that the folks with the lived experience, whatever it is, are the experts, and they need to be at the table. And then my second quote, which is a newer one that I found, and it's from the Talmud, which is, I believe, a Hebrew religious text. And it is that it's not up for you to finish the work, but neither are you free to not take it up. And I think that is just important to know that we don't have to expect me to change the world. I am one piece of a big system of a wonderful recovery community. And when all of us do the work together, we're going to make a big impact. And then folks after us will continue to make that impact.
Well, I think that's a wonderful way to sum up our conversation or wrap it up. I so appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to talk with me and to share, and would love to have you back on the show at some point in the future.
Most definitely. It was great to talk with you.
Dissect and Connect is sponsored by Teen Connections, a leadership program through Planned Parenthood South Atlantic that empowers youth with the facts about sexual health and the skills to build stronger, healthier relationships. It's free, totally virtual, and you can earn $100 when you graduate as a Teen Connections peer educator in your community. Join a Teen Connections program from home today. For more information, be sure to check out the show notes from today's episode. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Dissect and Connect podcast. To learn more about Montgomery County Prevention Partners, or New River Valley Community Services, be sure to check us out on Facebook or visit nrvcs.org/podcast.